This story is inspired by real events and documented moments from Amy Winehouse's life. Some scenes have been dramatized to capture the emotional truth of her connection with Tony Bennett. Amy's hands were shaking. She tried to hide it, clasped them together, pressed them against her sides, tucked them into the pockets of her vintage dress. But they wouldn't stop. March 23, 2011. Wednesday morning, Abbey Road Studios, Studio 2. Amy stood in the corridor outside, staring at the door. Behind it, history waited. The same room where the Beatles recorded Sgt. Pepper's, where Pink Floyd laid down Dark Side of the Moon, where Paul McCartney and Wings created Band, On the Run. Every legendary British recording seemed to have passed through that door. And now it was Amy's turn. Except she wasn't sure she deserved to be here. Her management had picked her up at 9 that morning. Amy had been awake since 5. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about today, about what it meant. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. A black and white polka dot dress. Vintage from a Camden market stall. Her signature beehive perfectly constructed. Eyeliner wings sharp enough to cut. Red lipstick applied with a steady hand. She looked like the Amy from 2007, from the Back to Black era, when she was on top of the world. But that Amy felt like a stranger now. 4 years. 4 years since she'd released an album. Since she'd felt like herself. Since the music came easy. 4 years of tabloid headlines, rehab stints, a marriage that destroyed her, public meltdowns captured by 1,000 camera phones, the world watching her fall apart in real time. Everyone knew her story. Everyone had an opinion. Amy Winehouse, troubled star, tragic figure, cautionary tale. But today she was trying to be something else. Someone else, a jazz singer, recording with her hero. If only her hands would stop shaking. The studio door opened. A production assistant smiled at her. Young guy, mid-20s, trying to act professional, but Amy could see the recognition in his eyes. The way he looked at her, like she might explode at any moment. "We're ready for you, Miss Winehouse." Amy nodded, took a breath, walked through the door. Studio 2 was massive. High ceilings, wood paneling. The walls absorbed sound like a cathedral absorbed prayer. Equipment everywhere. Microphones on stands. Cables snaking across the floor. The famous console where engineers had mixed some of the greatest albums ever made. And in the center of the room, standing by a microphone, was Tony Bennett. 85 years old, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. Silver hair perfectly combed. Smiling warmly as Amy entered. He looked exactly like he did in the photographs Amy had studied as a teenager. Ageless, timeless, a living link to the golden age of jazz. "Amy!" Tony walked toward her, arms outstretched. "So good to see you again." They hugged. Tony's embrace was warm, fatherly. Amy felt herself relax slightly, just slightly. "Hi." "Tony," she managed. Her voice sounded small in the big room. "You look beautiful," Tony said. "Ready to make some music?" Amy nodded. Didn't trust herself to say more. The production team moved around them efficiently. Sound engineers, camera operators, Tony's longtime producer, Dave Bennett, his son, Amy's own team hovering near the edges. Everyone was being very careful, very professional, very gentle with Amy. She hated it, that kid gloves treatment, like she was made of glass. But she also understood it. Her reputation preceded her. Stories had spread through the industry. Amy Winehouse was difficult, unpredictable, would show up drunk to sessions, or not show up at all, would record brilliantly for an hour, then storm out, would be charming one moment, hostile the next. Tony's team had been hesitant about this collaboration. Amy knew that. She'd heard the whispers through her management. Is she reliable? Can she actually do this? What if she's drunk? But Tony had insisted, specifically requested Amy, for body and soul. Wouldn't take no for an answer. That meant everything to Amy, that Tony believed in her when no one else seemed to, and she was determined not to let him down. She'd been preparing for weeks, listening to every version of Body and Soul she could find. Billie Holiday, Dinah Washington, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, studying the phrasing, the dynamics, the emotion. Body and Soul was a 1930 jazz standard, written by Johnny Green, one of the most recorded songs in history. Every great jazz singer had tackled it, and it was her father's favorite song. Mitch had played it constantly when Amy was growing up, would sing along in the car, in the kitchen, anywhere. When Amy told him she was recording it with Tony Bennett, Mitch had cried. Actually cried. "My favorite song," he'd said, "with Tony Bennett. Amy, do you know what this means?" She knew. God, she knew. This wasn't just another recording. This was a statement, a return, a chance to show the world she was still Amy Winehouse, still a real singer, not just a tabloid disaster. But standing in Studio 2, looking at Tony Bennett and the production team and all those cameras, Amy felt the weight of it crushing her. What if she couldn't do it? What if her voice was gone? What if 3 years away from proper recording had destroyed whatever gift she'd once had? Tony must have seen something in her face. He walked over, spoke quietly, just for her. "Amy, you okay?" She nodded, forced a smile. "Yeah, just nervous." "That's natural," Tony said. "I still get nervous before I sing. After 70 years of performing, the nerves never go away. You just learn to use them." "How?" Amy asked. "They mean you care," Tony explained. "If you weren't nervous, it would mean this didn't matter to you. The nerves are proof that it does." Amy absorbed that. It helped. A little. "Come on," Tony said gently. "Let's look at the setup. Get comfortable with the space." He guided her toward the microphones. 2 of them, standing about 5 feet apart. Professional distance, but close enough to see each other's faces. To react, to connect. "This is the Neumann U47, the sound engineer explained, pointing to Amy's microphone. One of the most famous microphones in history, used on countless classic recordings. The Beatles used it. Sinatra used it. Now, you." Amy reached out, touched the microphone gently. The metal was cool under her fingers. Solid. Real. This was happening. This was actually happening. "Should we do a sound check?" Dave Bennett asked. "Get levels?" Tony looked at Amy. "You ready?" She nodded, walked to her microphone, put on the headphones the engineer handed her. The studio suddenly felt even bigger, more empty, more full of ghosts. All those legends who'd stood in this room. All those perfect performances captured here. All that history pressing down on her shoulders. Amy closed her eyes, took a breath. She thought about Dinah Washington, her idol, the singer she'd studied more than any other. Dinah's phrasing, her tone, her fearlessness. Dinah had died at 39, too young, too much tragedy, too much pain. Amy was 27. Somehow that felt significant, dangerous, like she was running out of time. "Whenever you're ready, Amy," the engineer's voice came through the headphones. Amy opened her eyes, looked at Tony. He smiled encouragingly. She opened her mouth and sang a few notes, just warming up, testing. Her voice sounded strange through the headphones, closer than usual, more intimate, every imperfection magnified. "That's great," the engineer said. "Perfect levels. We're good to go." Tony stepped up to his microphone. The band would be added later. This was just the 2 of them, voice to voice, connection to connection. "You ready to try the song?" Tony asked. Amy wanted to say no, wanted to run, wanted to be anywhere but here. Instead, she nodded. "Yes, let's do it." The engineer started the track. Those familiar chords filled the studio, that classic jazz progression that had existed for 80 years. Tony began singing. His voice was incredible, smooth as silk, rich as honey, effortless in a way that only comes from decades of mastery. He sang about life and death and love and loss, about giving everything, about surrendering completely. Amy's cue approached, 4 bars away, 3, 2. Her throat tightened, her chest felt compressed, like she couldn't get enough air. 1 bar. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The music continued, Her cue passed. Tony kept singing, covering for her, but Amy had missed her entrance. "Sorry," she called out. "Sorry, can we stop?" The music cut off. Silence filled the studio, heavy and awkward. Amy felt everyone looking at her, the production team, the engineers. Tony. This was it. This was the moment they'd all been worried about. Amy Winehouse falling apart. "I'm so sorry," Amy said. Her voice cracked. "I don't know what happened. I froze." Tony walked over. To her, not rushing, not panicking, just calmly crossing the space between them. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. That happens. First take jitters. Completely normal." "I don't want to waste your time," Amy whispered. "You're Tony Bennett. I haven't recorded in 3 years. I'm out of practice. I'm not good enough for this." Tony's expression changed. His eyes grew serious. He took Amy's hands in his. They were warm, steady, not shaking like hers. "Listen to me," Tony said firmly. "You are good enough. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. I specifically asked for you. Do you understand? I wanted to sing this song with you, not anyone else. You." Amy felt tears pricking her eyes. She blinked them back. "Why?" "Because you're a real jazz singer," Tony said simply. "I can hear it in your voice, in your phrasing, in your understanding of the music. You have the gift, Amy, the real gift, and that's rare. So rare." "But I keep messing up," Amy said. "And everyone's watching, and there are cameras, and this is being documented, and I'm terrified I'm going to ruin your album." Tony smiled. "You're not going to ruin anything. You're going to be wonderful. But first, you need to stop thinking about everyone watching. Stop thinking about the cameras. Stop thinking about your reputation or the tabloids or what anyone expects." "How?" Amy asked. "By remembering why you do this," Tony said. "Why do you sing, Amy?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Because I love it?" "Exactly," Tony said. "You love it. The music, the feeling, the connection. That's what matters. Not perfection, not what people think. The love." He squeezed her hands gently. "Let's try something. Close your eyes." Amy did. The studio disappeared. Just darkness and Tony's voice. "Now imagine you're not here," Tony continued. "You're somewhere you feel safe. Where do you feel safest singing?" "The Jazz Cafe," Amy said immediately. "In Camden. Small venue, low ceiling, intimate. Just me and the audience and the music." "Good," Tony said. "You're there now? The Jazz Cafe. Small room. People who love jazz. People who understand. You're not performing for cameras or producers or critics. You're just singing. For yourself. For the music. For the love of it." Amy breathed. Felt herself settling. The panic receding. "That's where I am too," Tony said. "In a small jazz club in New York, 1950s. Just me and the band and people who came to listen. That's where I always go in my head. No matter how big the venue, no matter who's watching, I find that small club, that intimate space, and I sing for them." Amy opened her eyes. Tony was smiling at her. "You ready to try again?" he asked. "Yes," Amy said. And this time, she meant it. They walked back to their microphones. Amy put the headphones back on, adjusted her position slightly, found her balance. The music started again, those same chords, that same progression, but this time Amy heard them differently. She wasn't in Abbey Road Studios anymore. She was at the Jazz Cafe, small room, warm lights, people who loved music. Tony began singing, and Amy listened, really listened, to his phrasing, his dynamics, the way he shaped the words. Her cue approached, but this time she was ready. She opened her mouth and the notes flowed out, natural, unforced, real. But something was still wrong. She could feel it. The notes were correct, but the emotion wasn't quite there. She was singing the song, not inhabiting it. Tony heard it too. After the first verse, he held up his hand. The music stopped again. "That was better," he said. "Much better. But I want to ask you something." "Okay," Amy said. Tony walked closer, spoke quietly, intimately, the way one jazz singer speaks to another. "When you sing," Tony said, "who do you hear? Who inspires you? Who do you channel?" Amy thought about it. Lots of people. Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. All the greats, Tony nodded. I knew them all, performed with most of them. Billie was extraordinary. Tortured soul, but what a voice. What an emotional truth. Ella could do things technically that defied physics. Pure instrument. And Sarah, he smiled. Sarah Vaughan had a range that could make you weep. Amy listened, mesmerized. Tony Bennett had known these legends, had sung with them, had lived through the golden age of American jazz. He was a living bridge to that era, and he was standing here, talking to her, sharing these memories with her. But there's someone else I hear in your voice, Tony continued. He looked at Amy carefully. Someone specific. Who? Amy asked. Tony paused, studied her face. Then he said 4 words. 4 simple words that changed everything. You sound like Dinah. Time stopped. Amy's entire body went still. Her heart seemed to pause mid-beat. The studio disappeared. The cameras. The production team. Everything. What? She whispered. Dinah Washington, Tony said. Your phrasing, your tone, the way you approach a melody. It's not exactly like her, but I can hear her influence. It sounds like you've studied her, channeled her. Amy felt tears spring to her eyes. Actual tears, hot and immediate. How did you know? Her voice broke. How did you possibly know? Tony looked confused. Know what? That Dinah Washington is my goddess, Amy said, the words tumbling out. That I've listened to every recording she ever made, that I've studied every note, every breath, every phrase, that she's the one I've always tried to sound like. More than Billie, more than Ella, more than anyone. Tony's face broke into a huge smile. I knew it. I could hear it in your voice, that particular quality, that fearlessness, that deep emotional truth combined with technical precision. That's Dinah. Amy was crying now, really crying. Mascara probably running, eyeliner probably smudged, but she didn't care. Nobody ever hears that, she said. Everyone always says Billie, or they say I sound like someone from the Ronettes. But Dinah is the one. She's always been the one. Tony nodded, clearly moved by Amy's reaction. I knew Dinah, he said quietly. Performed with her several times. Vegas mostly. She'd show up unannounced. Just walk into whatever club we were playing and say, I'm here, boss. And every singer on the strip would cancel their plans to watch her. Really? Amy wiped her eyes. Really, Tony confirmed. She was that magnetic, that powerful. When Dinah was in the room, nothing else mattered. She commanded attention without trying, just by being herself. She died so young, Amy said. Not even 40. 39, Tony said, his voice heavy with sadness. She had a tough life, a lot of pain, a lot of tragedy. But what a voice, what a presence. He paused, looked at Amy intently, and for just a moment something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of darkness, of pain, of the cost of being an artist. But Tony didn't say it out loud, didn't make the connection explicit, didn't say, you're like her in more ways than just your voice. You're both self-destructive, both running from pain, both heading toward early graves. He thought it. Amy could see it in his eyes, but he didn't say it. Instead, he said, want to try the song again? Channel Dinah, let her live in your voice. Amy nodded, wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a shaking breath. Something had shifted. That tightness in her chest was gone. The fear had dissolved. The panic had evaporated. Tony understood her, really understood her. He didn't just hear her voice. He heard where it came from, the lineage, the history, the love. They walked back to their microphones. The production team remained silent, watching, waiting. The engineer started the track again. Those familiar chords filled the studio. Tony began singing, his voice like warm honey, like aged whiskey, like coming home. Amy listened, really listened, heard the spaces between the notes, the dynamics, the emotion. Her cue approached, And this time, when she opened her mouth, everything changed. She wasn't Amy Winehouse anymore. She was a vessel, a channel. Dinah Washington lived in her voice, in her phrasing, in every note she sang. The production team behind the glass sat up straighter. This was it. This was what they'd been hoping for. Tony heard it too. His eyes lit up. He nodded at Amy as they sang together, encouraging her, supporting her, meeting her halfway. Their voices wove together like silk threads. 2 generations, 2 souls, 1 song. 60 years of age difference dissolving into pure music. Amy sang about love and loss and surrendering everything, about giving body and soul, about holding nothing back. And for once, she wasn't performing. She was being, existing fully in the music, in the moment, in the connection with Tony and the song and the history of jazz itself. When they finished, the studio was completely silent. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then the production team erupted in applause. Engineers stood up. Camera operators lowered their equipment to clap. Bennett was grinning from ear to ear. Amy stood there, stunned, tears still on her cheeks, not quite believing what had just happened. Tony walked over to her, pulled her into a tight hug. That, he said into her hair, was beautiful. That was real jazz singing. That was the truth. "Thank you," Amy whispered. "Thank you for seeing me. How could I not?" Tony pulled back, looked at her face. "You're a natural, Amy. Born for this music. Born for this moment." They recorded 4 more takes, each one slightly different, each one exploring different emotional territories within the song. Between takes, Tony told her stories about Dinah, about performing in Vegas in the 1960s, about what it meant to be a real jazz singer in a world that increasingly didn't understand jazz. "It's not about showing off," Tony explained, "not about hitting every note perfectly, not about technical precision, though that matters. It's about feeling, about truth, about being vulnerable enough to let the emotion through. That's what you have," he continued, "that vulnerability, that willingness to be raw, to be real. That's your gift, Amy. Never lose that." Amy absorbed every word. She'd waited her whole life for this conversation, to sit with a legend and talk about music, real music, the music she loved more than anything. After the 5th take, Bennett came into the studio. "I think we got it," he said, smiling. "That last one was perfect." Tony looked at Amy. "You happy with it?" Amy nodded. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but satisfied. "Yes, I think it's good." "It's more than good," Tony said. "It's exceptional." They spent another hour in the studio, recording pickup lines, getting alternate takes of specific phrases, making sure they had everything they needed. The whole time, Amy felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of expectation had lifted. The fear had dissolved. She was just singing, just making music with someone she respected, someone who respected her back. When they finally finished, the production team packed up equipment. Camera operators disassembled their setups. The session was officially over. Amy's final recording session, though nobody in that room knew it yet. In 4 months, she would be dead. Found in her Camden flat on July 23, 2011. Alcohol poisoning, age 27. But that March day, she was alive, present, happy. Tony walked her to the studio door. "This was special, Amy. Really special. Thank you for doing this with me. Thank you for asking me," Amy said. "This meant everything." Tony studied her face. His expression was complicated. There was warmth there, pride, but also sadness, concern, like he saw something he didn't want to see. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Amy," he started, then stopped. "What?" she asked. Tony seemed to be wrestling with something, deciding whether to say it, whether this was the right moment. Finally, he just said, "Take care of yourself, okay? The world needs your voice." Amy nodded, smiled. "I will, I promise." They hugged goodbye, long and warm, like family. Then Amy walked out of Abbey Road Studios, into the March afternoon, back to her life, her chaos, her demons. She didn't know she'd never record again, didn't know she only had 4 months left, didn't know that Body and Soul would become her farewell. She just knew she'd had a perfect day. A day where she felt seen, understood, valued. A day where she got to be Amy Winehouse, the jazz singer. Not Amy Winehouse, the tabloid disaster. That night she called her father. "Dad," she said, her voice bright with joy. "Dad, you're not going to believe what happened today." "Tell me everything," Mitch said. So Amy did. Told him about Tony, about the studio, about singing Body and Soul, about Tony recognizing her Dinah Washington influence. "He said I sounded like Dinah, Dad. Tony Bennett said I sounded like Dinah Washington." Mitch was crying on the other end of the line. Amy could hear it in his voice. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he managed. "So incredibly proud." They talked for an hour, Amy reliving every moment, every detail, every word Tony had said. It was the happiest Mitch had heard Amy sound in years. 4 months later, Amy would be gone, and that phone call would haunt Mitch forever. The memory of his daughter's joy, her excitement, her hope. But he was grateful for it too. Grateful Amy got to have that perfect day, that perfect session, that perfect connection with her hero. Tony Bennett would think about that Abbey Road session for the rest of his life. In September 2011, 3 months after Amy died, he did an interview with Howard Stern. His voice broke when he talked about her. "It's a great loss," Tony said, tears in his eyes. "Such incredible talent. Gone too soon." Howard asked about the recording session. "She was nervous at first," Tony said, "but once we started singing, once she relaxed, she was extraordinary. A natural jazz singer. Real intuition, real feeling." He paused, struggled with emotion. "I wanted her at my 85th birthday concert," Tony continued. "At the London Palladium. I wanted to sit down with her and tell her. When I was younger, I took a left there for a while." He meant drugs, alcohol, his own battles with addiction in the 1970s. Battles he'd won, a darkness he'd survived. "I wanted to tell her you could bring yourself back," Tony said. "That recovery was possible, that the music would still be there waiting." But he never got the chance. Never had that conversation, never said those words that might have made a difference. "I have questions and regrets," Tony admitted. Howard let the silence sit, respectful, heavy. "But I'm grateful we got to make that recording," Tony finally said. "That I got to sing with her. That the world has that document of her talent. Her real talent, not the tabloid version, the artist." The song was released on September 14, 2011. What would have been Amy's 28th birthday. The music video interspersed footage from the recording session with the final audio. Amy looking happy, healthy, laughing with Tony, her face full of life and joy. Millions of people watched it. Millions of people cried. When Body and Soul charted on the Billboard Hot 100, Tony Bennett became the oldest living artist to ever appear on the list. At 85 years old, Amy became one of the few artists to chart posthumously with a new release. In February 2012, the song won a Grammy, Best Pop Duo Posh Group Performance, Tony's 20th Grammy, Amy's 6th. Tony accepted the award alone, standing on that stage at the Staples Center, holding the trophy, voice thick with emotion. "This is for Amy," he said simply. "She was one of the greats, a once-in-a-generation talent, and I'm honored I got to sing with her." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Many were crying. Later, Tony donated his portion of the Grammy proceeds to the Amy Winehouse Foundation, the charity Mitch had created to help young people struggling with addiction. "It belongs there," Tony said. "Amy would want it to help others." In 2016, Tony published his memoir, Just Getting Started. An entire section was devoted to Amy, to that recording session, to his regrets. "Sometimes someone will say something that strikes home on just the right day," he wrote. "I said nothing on the day that I might have had a chance." He wondered endlessly if he should have said more. Should have talked to Amy about addiction, about recovery, about survival. Would it have made a difference? Tony wrote. "I'll never know, but I think about it often, about what I could have said, should have said." He described Amy's talent in almost reverential terms. "She took the spirit of jazz and made it shine in new ways for a new generation," Tony wrote. "She had the voice of an angel, a being that works on a plane higher than the one most of us inhabit down here." Tony lived another 7 years after publishing that memoir, died in July 2023 at age 96 in his hometown of New York. His collaboration with Amy Winehouse remained one of his most treasured recordings, one of his most meaningful artistic experiences. And those 4 words he said to her that day in Abbey Road Studios echoed forever. "You sound like Dinah." 4 words that saw her, that understood her, that connected her to the lineage she loved. 4 words that gave Amy one perfect day of feeling valued, seen, understood. The Neumann U47 microphone Amy used that day is still at Abbey Road Studios, still used on recordings, still capturing voices. But that March 23, 2011 session remains one of its most famous, most treasured, most heartbreaking. Abbey Road created an exhibit about historic recordings made in their studios. Body and Soul features prominently the final collaboration, the last recording. The goodbye nobody knew was goodbye. Jazz musicians around the world studied that recording, taught it in schools, used it as an example of pure, honest jazz singing. Wynton Marsalis, the jazz trumpet legend, said, "That recording with Tony Bennett proves what some of us always knew. Amy Winehouse was a legitimate jazz singer, not a pop star dabbling in jazz, a real artist who understood the tradition, who honored it, who belonged in that lineage." Questlove, the drummer and producer, tweeted after Tony's death, "Tony and Amy's Body and Soul is one of the most emotionally devastating recordings I've ever heard. You can hear the respect, the love, the understanding. 2 generations connected by pure music." The 6-decade age gap between Tony and Amy made headlines when the album was released. Oldest and youngest artists on duets to second, but when you listen to the recording, age disappeared. They sounded like contemporaries, like old souls who'd been singing together forever. That's the magic of real music, real connection. It transcends time, age, generation, circumstance, everything. Tony understood that. Amy understood that. And for one perfect session, they created something eternal. Mitch Winehouse still can't listen to Body and Soul without crying, but he plays it anyway, often, especially on Amy's birthday. And on the anniversary of that recording session. "That was my daughter," he says every time. The real Amy, the one who loved music more than anything, the one who just wanted to sing. In interviews, Mitch always mentions Tony's kindness, his patience, his respect for Amy. Tony saw her as an artist, Mitch explains, not as a troubled celebrity, not as a cautionary tale, as a jazz singer, as someone worthy of respect and collaboration. That meant everything to Amy, gave her back some dignity when the world was treating her like a circus act. The behind-the-scenes footage from the session was eventually released. 12 minutes of Amy and Tony talking, laughing, working through the song, being artists together. It's bittersweet to watch. Amy looks so happy, so present, so alive. She calls Tony Tone with obvious affection, jokes about her dad being jealous, talks about how nervous she is. "This is weird," she tells Tony in the footage. "I've never done anything like this. To sing with one of my idols?" "Oh no, it'll be wonderful," Tony assures her, his voice full of warmth. And it was wonderful. It really was. The final moment of the video shows them listening to the playback, hearing their voices blended together, both smiling, both satisfied. "That's beautiful," Amy says softly. "Really beautiful." "You're beautiful," Tony tells her. "Your talent is beautiful." Amy's face in that moment is pure joy, pure pride, pure love of music. That's how people choose to remember her. Not the tabloid photos, not the public struggles, not the tragic ending. That moment, in Abbey Road Studios, singing with her hero, being seen, being valued, being understood. 4 words changed everything that day. You sound like Dinah. 4 words that said, I see you. I understand you. You belong here. You're part of this lineage. You're a real jazz singer. For someone who felt lost and alone, who felt like she'd destroyed everything, who felt like the world saw her as nothing but a disaster, those words were everything. They couldn't save her. Nothing could. Amy's demons were too deep, too complex, too overwhelming, but they gave her one perfect day, one session where she felt like herself, where the music came easy, where she connected with someone who understood, and they gave the world one final gift, a recording that captured Amy Winehouse at her absolute best, not performing, not struggling, just singing, really singing, the way Dinah would have, the way Billy would have, the way Ella would have, the way only Amy could. That's her legacy, not the tragedy, not the tabloids, not the cautionary tale. The music, the voice, the truth. A 27-year-old jazz singer from Camden who channeled the legends, who honored the tradition, who gave everything to the art she loved. And an 85-year-old master who saw her clearly, who understood her deeply, who gave her the gift of recognition in her final recording. 2 artists, 2 generations, 1 perfect song. That's what matters. That's what lasts. That's what the world will remember. 4 words, 4 simple words. You sound like Dinah. They changed everything. If you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, please reach out for help. The Amy Winehouse Foundation continues her legacy by supporting vulnerable young people. You're not alone. The Amy Winehouse Foundation, www.amywinehousefoundation.org. UK Addiction Support, Frank, 0300 123 6600. U.S. Addiction Support, Sam Hartza, National Helpline, 1-800-624-357.